AVerMedia have done it. They have released a webcam that I can actually recommend from a gaming webcam company that does 4K, 1080p 60, a nice wide field of view here. It's got some pretty cool features and it doesn't cost too much, but it is a little pricey, but it's within the range that I had originally suggested back when we talked about their mysterious webcam that you can't buy. We're going to talk about all of this in today's webcam review. This is the AVerMedia PW513. But not before I tell you about this video's sponsor, Nerd or Die. This video is brought to you by Nerd or Die and their new terminal cyberpunk themed stream layout. You've got alerts, you've got overlays, you've got a full layout to choose from, customizable elements, stinger transitions, and all the source files, if you wish, available to edit for yourself and change colors, change aspects, or render them out for YouTube videos. Pretty cool stuff here, and you can save 15% across the entire website by heading over to eposvox.gg/nerdordie and use coupon code EposVox at checkout. I'm EposVox, your stream professor, and it makes me so freaking happy to be able to recommend multiple webcam releases recently, as I have a long history on this channel of being very unhappy with where at least Logitech have been going with webcams on the market, and their frustrating software and the controls that don't save past reboot without some hacky workarounds. And from what I gather, most of the streaming community has been pretty frustrated with the webcam scene as well, and AVerMedia saw an opportunity to step in. Now, back in March of this year, I got to check out AVerMedia's webcam that they don't sell. It's the PW513, and this was a webcam that had one of their business kind of conference cam bodies, and some people found it in bundles for like $500, but it had 4K 25 FPS, which was pretty disappointing, but a really nice wide field of view and 1080p 60 that looked really nice. The settings saved past reboot. It had a lot of good stuff going for it, and they let me test it out just to test the waters, and I was like, hey, you need to release this. They said how much. I said it can be no more than $300, and that was based on the original price point of the Logitech Brio. And then the stream cam released, and it was a little bit cheaper than that for about $250. And from what I gather, they just couldn't make it happen. But what they did do was they basically turned it into a new gaming cam. So this is kind of a sequel to their previous webcam release for gamers called the PW313. Now I have this. I tested it a little bit. I never really reviewed it. The quality wasn't super great and the features felt kind of gimmicky, so I never really did a ton with it. But it existed. It was a thing. But this one, I think, is the real, like, this is it kind of recommendation for those who have been wanting a high quality webcam but don't want to have to invest $500, $800 in things like the Sub 2R or a real camera like my A6400s I have going here and things like that. By the way, if you didn't notice, we're already shooting on the webcam here. This is the quality that it looks like, set to 4K 30 FPS. Pretty cool. Talking details about this camera real quick here, it comes in at $249.99 or $250 here, which to me is a good spot for this camera. I realize for a lot of people that this is still really expensive, this is still a big investment, and depending on the price point and whether or not we're in a pandemic, you can get real cameras cheaper that may be better for your solution. Like previously, I was picking up A5100s from Sony, and then you throw in one of the little like $15 cam links or something, cant links, and you have a nice real camera with actual optical zoom, 1080p 60, manual controls and all of that, and really good autofocus and much better depth of field than we have here. But the market has changed quite a bit, and that's not entirely realistic anymore. And you can still get camcorders and stuff for that price, but unless you need specific like autofocus features, this is actually going to look better than a lot of the cheaper camcorders that I have recommended in the past, and the same thing with the GoPro knockoffs and things like that. So I am quite impressed. Specs wise, we're looking at a Sony Exmor R image sensor here. It supports 4K 30 or 1080p up to 60 FPS. We've got a nice super wide 94-degree field of view, ultra wide angle lens. Looks really nice. It uses USB 3.0. It is not backwards compatible with USB 2.0 like the previous model, and it comes with this little privacy shutter in case you're worrying about people spying on you. Now they do include some onboard microphones with some active noise cancellation stuff that seem pretty cool. I'm actually using, I just switched to those microphones, so you're hearing them now. It's a built-in microphone. It's not going to sound amazing, but it's pretty cool. Some notable features though that I really appreciate it has a full 360-degree swivel, so you can get the exact angle pan, tilt, and complete rotation exactly to get the angle that you want. Has a nice little monitor clamp as well as a tripod 1/4-20 thread screw, so you can mount it pretty much any way that you want, which I really like. Something that may be a knock for some of you here is that it doesn't have autofocus. It is a fixed focus system, which I think is the right choice. Originally, I was like, hey, what the heck? I think it was the right choice. I had a lot of complaints in my sponsored video about the Huddle Cam HD, where it had some degree of focus range, but I wasn't really in focus, but like everything was kind of, it was basically a fixed focus lens as well. But any autofocus that I've tested on webcam, such as the Logitech StreamCam earlier this year, or the Brio or whatever, you don't have much autofocus range, because the way webcam lenses work, when you do get autofocus on them, especially the Logitech ones, you get from literally right up on top of the camera, that is minimum focus is 0 inches off the camera, out to about like right here, like 6 to 9 inches is infinity focus, and then everything back there is infinity focus. So while you do have some degree of autofocus on those cameras to hold up something like this and it focus on it, it's not useful for your face. And Logitech kept advertising these weird face tracking autofocus things, which didn't really matter unless you're getting like right up on it. But you can see here, this is a fixed focus lens, and it's fixed in a way that pretty much everything is in focus all the time. You can see the detail in everything behind me. You can see the detail on the stuff next to me. You can see the detail on my face. And if I hold something up to the camera, it is more or less in focus as well. And so I get right up on it, I've still got plenty of detail here. So I know a lot of people are gonna see that and be like, whoa, no autofocus, what the heck? Within the physics of how webcams work, I 100% think this is the right choice. And while you don't get depth of field because it's a tiny webcam sensor, I think this is the best look, IMO. In terms of color formats, it does MJPEG and UY-VY, which is basically YUY2, which is 422 color. If you watched any of my capture card reviews and stuff, I prefer those modes because they're uncompressed, whereas MJPEG is literally JPEG compression, and so it can have some extra artifacting and noise and things like that. However, it is a limitation, as we've run into with all 4K webcams at this point, in that 4K 30 is MJPEG only. Now, I have seen devices that can do 4K 30 over USB, not in MJPEG, in V12. However, it's more or less like right at the limits of USB 3.0 transfer speeds. And while a lot of the higher end computers and stuff are bumping up to 3.2 Gen 2 and we're getting 10 and 20 gigabit per second ports, everything's always trying to appeal to the, most common denominator, so they will have the most compatible formats here, in that USB 3.0 is limited to MJPEG for 4K 30. That is disappointing, but you're seeing it here, and the results are actually fairly solid given that it's a webcam and not a capture card, so you don't have a ton of crazy movement going on and small details, but I would have preferred to see something else. And frankly, with these devices, you can have both. I mean, hell, their previous webcam that you couldn't buy that I reviewed had USB 3.0 and 2.0 support, even in 4K. By using that compression. So realistically, you could have, since it does have a USB Type-C port on the back, you could have USB 3.2 Gen 2 compatibility for higher bandwidth modes for those wanting to run USB-C to C and use high bandwidth ports, but then only make available MJPEG over those normal 3.0 ports. I'm a little torn on that. So the software is where this camera gets really bonkers and awesome, because you have a high quality 4K webcam here, and while it doesn't have the depth of field or some of the sharpness aspects of my $1,000 A6400 here with a $400 lens slapped on it and a $120 filter on top of that, it still looks pretty competent. It looks pretty good for your streams, for your YouTube videos, for vlogs. If I could start my YouTube channel with this camera compared to what I started my YouTube channel with, you're good. Like this is fine for content, for streams, for facecam, for anything. This is good. The software side is where things get really cool. Some of it's gimmicky, but some of it is pretty cool. So they have their CamEngine software, kind of like their stream engine for their capture cards, which gives you some control over the camera. In the basic tab, you get access to brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and sharpness. And all of these are manual. You set them, you reboot your computer, they're still there when you come back. And what is cool is you don't have the normal weird balance of exposure versus gain versus backlight that most Logitech webcams have in the UVC driver. You don't really have those. What you have is a brightness slider that kind of manages all that in a much smoother and better way. So right now I'm sitting at about brightness level 6. If I turn it down, you can see we start getting darker here. Turn it up, we start getting brighter. But unlike the UVC controls of normal webcams, this brightness slider is not a post brightness slider. Like you have on Logitech webcams, you have your exposure and your gain, which primarily control the actual exposure of your camera. And then brightness is just kind of like a levels thing after the fact, after those have already been applied. This is like a blend of all of that. So you actually manage your exposure. So I'm using very high key lights here that provide a lot of light. And so by default, it's shipped about here-ish, which has me completely blown out and kind of ghosty, and that was too much. But I don't need to manage gain for noise versus exposure. I just turn brightness down and I kick it down to 6, and I look more or less how I'm supposed to look. That's 5. That might be better. It's about the same. Then you have contrast, hue, saturation, sharpness. I've actually added a little sharpness here if I turn it down. And then of course you can crank it all the way up, but I recommend keep it around 1. You don't want a ton of sharpness unless you're trying to get like text or something. And then under the advanced tab, you get a backlight compensator, which I don't feel like it does much of anything. And then an anti-flicker. Now, if you're using I'm currently accessing the camera directly in OBS Studio. You have the option of accessing the camera as a webcam or accessing it through the CamEngine software. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the CamEngine version now. So we got a little bit more punchy, more contrasty, maybe just a little bit, but it unlocks some more controls in the CamEngine software that we can access. So we have the regular settings, but then we have filters, which provides additional brightness sliders for skin tone. So I can just disable it entirely. You may not see much of a difference here. If I enable it, I can crank up the skin tone slider, which provides a little bit of brightness boost specifically to skin tone colors. You can see it affecting the background a little bit because I have a lot of like white-ish in my background. But it provides a bit of like face refinement here, and there's also a facial smoothing option. So this is on 0. Let's get right up on it. This is on 0. This is cranked all the way up. You can see I get that like caked on makeup look. So it gets pretty wild. But I'm actually a fan of this because of course vloggers, beauty people, whatever, may appreciate that extra look. But also I use a lot of facial smoothing stuff because it just renders your face in a more pleasant way. And when you're creating content, you want every frame to look as ideal as possible, unless you're doing something where you want gritty realism. And so all of my cameras that I typically use here, they have pro mist filters on them to help diffuse the light on my skin, makes me look a little bit more pleasing to the eye, and that's not uncommon. And so this facial smoothing thing, while it can go totally overkill, is pretty cool. Then you have an effects column, which gives you little face tracking things. Now this was the gimmicky stuff I was talking about that was available on the previous camera. Unfortunately, it's not the same kind of like, I don't know. There's only a few options. You have a couple animals, you have a couple like cutesy things, and then you have a couple general options with these little face tracking filters, and they sometimes lose your face, and they're not super accurate. I consider this to be super gimmicky and silly. But it doesn't hold up to anything quite like Snap Camera or anything like that. But if you want to mess around with it, it is available to you. This will use more system resources to power through it and stuff. What I really appreciate here is the ePTZ mode. So you can click Start Face Tracking Composition, and it will automatically adjust to include whoever you are. And it will automatically adjust to include everyone that's in the frame. So if you have multiple people, it will adjust based on that. Or it will adjust based on who's talking, and you can control it there. And so if you start moving around the frame, it's kind of going to start adjusting based on where you are and where you're talking, so you can automatically track it, which is kind of how some of the NVIDIA broadcast engine software worked as well. So you can see we're getting a nice little zoom in and out and pan and tilt based on this. Now this is for AI tracking. If we uncheck that, it'll put us back to normal, and then we can set up virtual camera angles based on the ePTZ controls. So we have some controls at the top for zooming, so I can zoom all the way into 4 times. Of course, this is digital zoom. And zoom back out. But we can save different presets, and you'll want to use the CamEngine's preview for this, but you can save different presets of where you are, and then you can set up automatic little controls here. So I can be like, okay, here's my normal field of view, but if I want to punch in real fast, whoa, hey there everybody, back to normal, whoa, back to normal, whoa, pretty cool. And what I love is that the zooming is eased. So you can see as it zooms in, you know, like if you're used to video editing, keyframe easing, it speeds up really fast and then slows down. There's like a ramp to it, which is really nice and pleasing to the eye. And so I like that you have all this control, because then you can set up, there's like 15 or so different presets here where you can have all these different angles. If you're doing like a specific live stream, eventually they should hopefully let you map that to hotkeys and stuff, and then you can do a whole lot with it. I like it a lot. Now they do have a CamEngine Lite version of the software, both for Windows and Mac, if you don't want all these crazy face tracking features or anything like that, where you just want the controls over your image. That way you don't have to install extra junk, so that's an option to you as well. So this whole video has been recorded in the 4K 30 mode, because IMO, it looks the best. It has the most detail. It's rendering at actual 4K. I can tell it's not 1080p being interpolated or upscaled to 4K or what have you. But let's go ahead and briefly look at the 1080p modes. I don't think you're necessarily going to want to use them in all cases, and the 60 FPS leaves a little bit to be desired for me, but I really don't think the vast majority of people truly need or even should want 60 FPS on a webcam in the first place. You don't need it to sync up with your video or anything. No viewer notices the difference, and it requires more light, so it gets really dark and kind of grainy. So it has some weird custom resolution modes as well, which are mostly pointless. Like here's 3840 by 1080 if you want super ultra wide mode. Boom, cinematic shot. But this is still just the same as the 4K mode, so you could just crop to get this. But if you want like a super cinematic view, I don't know. So by dropping down to 1080p, we are able to use the 422 UI/VY mode, which is not MJPEG, you know, less compressed, and it has less artifacting, but it is a lower resolution now. So we are sacrificing some detail and some sharpness, but with the right light, it's pretty cool. And the whole time you may have noticed here with the 1080p and the 4K, it is super smooth. You don't have any of that Logitech webcam like jitteriness as you start moving and it can't figure out what to do. It is super smooth. So 1080p 30 is also a wonderful, usable, like this is a great webcam here as well. However, again, 1080p 60 is where we get weird. So I'm gonna kick it to 1080p 60. We're at 30 now. You can see here in the 60 FPS mode, we got a little bit more punchy, we got darker, so I'm gonna crank up that brightness a bit, and we're getting more grain because 60 FPS just requires more out of this camera. And I feel like we lose a lot of sharpness here in my face. You can see on like my beard hairs and stuff compared to the 1080p 30. I am concerned that the 60 FPS mode is being interpolated up from a lower resolution, which is why we lose some of the detail here, as is the case with many 60 FPS webcams. It's usually a lie. Here, I'm not sure it's not, because 60 shouldn't look this bad if 30 looks fine. Like resolution shouldn't change, but you can see we got grainier, we got darker, and we got blurrier. I wouldn't use it, but hey. And now we're back in 4K. So is the AVerMedia Streamer Cam PW513 worth $250? Depending on your budget, the answer may be no, just because it's too high of a cost. I get that. I understand. If so, that's unfortunate. However, given the state of the webcam market and my ongoing frustrations with it, this is the camera we have been waiting for on a streamer optimized side. Of course, I've covered the Huddle Cam. It's basically very similar quality. It just requires more light. I actually have a follow-up to that video coming soon where I use better lighting than is used here, because I think that wasn't super flattering to that camera, and I have gotten some really great results out of it. So get subscribed for that. But the AVerMedia Streamer Cam 513 or PW513 bypasses so many issues with the competition on the webcam market at the moment, between the weird autofocus issues, the lower resolution than it should be look, the smoothness factor, saving settings persistent across reboots. This camera bypasses all of the issues that the current webcam market has, presents a great quality for a webcam. It's low latency, it'll work great with all of your streams, and it's an all-around great package that I wasn't really expecting. I would not buy this for 60 FPS, and 60 FPS mode is garbage IMO, but for most people, I think this is it. I think this is the streamer cam. You can get both the Logitech Brio and the Logitech Stream Cam now for much cheaper than this, like $200 I think. However, unless price is your only like real consideration here, in which case you're probably not buying a $200 webcam anyway, I would be very hard pressed to recommend anyone get those Logitech cameras over this at this point. This is it. I hate sounding like a complete shill or something here, but like really, I have spent my entire career, longer than I've been reviewing capture cards, and those are like my main thing. I've spent my entire career as far back as like 2012 and 2013 reviewing and testing webcams, and never have I actually seen the webcam market addressed as perfectly as this camera. And that's pretty insane. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you are interested, they will start shipping tomorrow at the time of uploading, I believe, because I'm uploading this like a day before they actually start shipping, but pre-orders should be live. I will try to have affiliate product links or whatever product links in the description below. As always, hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe for more tech education and stream guides. And if you're curious about my backlog of webcam reviews, playlist link will be in the description below as well. Thanks so much for your support. I'll see you in the next one.